The first encounter with the all-too-evil substance known as Jimson weed was in March of 2005. My brother and a neighbor were running around the soybean field eating various seeds and the like, so I followed them and took part in this childish act of eating anything that they came across because I was very intoxicated. While in the midst of this game, I came across an evil-looking plant. This plant had an amazing aura about it. It gave me the chills looking into this four-paned orb from hell. It can only be described as Satan's rattle, a large brown orb covered in wicked spikes and open with small round black seeds with a curious dimple in the middle. I stood in awe at my new discovery. It made me feel so awkward just to be standing in front of such a demonic-looking plant. It made me want to turn and run from it, yet I was strangely being pulled into it. The next thing I know, I am gobbling down these seeds and going from pod to pod and devouring all that plant had to offer me. I thought nothing of it and moved on with the game. I went back to the house and smoked a joint and drank a can of Budweiser and then laid down to go to sleep. I awoke in a cold sweat at 4:15 a.m. and my body was on fire. I looked at the foot of my bed and my two best friends were standing there. I started laughing hysterically at the fact that they would stop by and wake me up at such a late time. I proceeded to have a little party in my room with them. They came up and sat on either side of me, and we had a great time passing joints and smoking cigarettes. I went to the bathroom and washed my hands. I looked in the mirror, and my face contorted to an impossible shape, and I shook myself off and splashed some water on my face, still none the wiser to what was happening. I walked back to my room where at my door my mother was standing. I greeted her and informed her that my friends had stopped by for a late-night visit. She gave me the weirdest look I think she has ever given me. I re-entered my room, and my friends were nowhere to be found. Suddenly, I went into a panic and started to tear my room apart. I searched high and low expecting them to be hiding, but of course, they were not. Then out of nowhere, I just blacked out. I awoke the next morning and I was naked on the living room floor with a blanket over me, and the house had been destroyed. My parents were sitting on the couch together, looking at me and talking. I looked up and I couldn't understand a word that they said though. Every word that they said sounded like they were speaking in reverse. Suddenly I sat up thinking that my parents had gone insane. I tried to stand up but failed horribly and just flopped back onto my back. In my mind, horrible thoughts began to swirl around. Thoughts that my parents had slipped me some drug while I was asleep and were speaking in a secret language so that I wouldn't be able to know what else they had planned for me. I don't believe that I have ever felt that scared in my entire life. I felt so alone and empty, like I was deserted on some horrible little island and that it was slowly sinking. I lay there for some time just thinking and soaking everything in. For some odd reason, I always had a cigarette in my hand that would never go out or need to be ashed. After a while, I drifted back to sleep. When I awoke, I was in my father's car and we were driving down this dark road that seemed to be covered in oil. It felt like we were floating above the road and sliding from side to side. I looked at him and tried to say something, but it came out as an inaudible squeak of intelligence. He looked at me and his beard seemed to grow longer as he looked into my eyes for eternity. It seemed as if time had stopped dead in its tracks, and for a minute, everything seemed fine. Then all of a sudden, I hit reality again, and hard too. It was like time had been still, but then had to fast forward to catch up with itself. I turned and looked into the mirror, and my reflection looked at me and started laughing at me. My reflection had this maniacal grin as it laughed in my face, seemingly mocking me and my tortured reality. This sent me into a rage that I could not hold back. I lashed out at the mirror trying to tear it off the side of the car. My father just hit the automatic window and up it went, and I couldn't see my reflection anymore. It was like staring into a mirror and no one is there to stare back. So my attention went from the mirror to my hand, where a freshly lit cigarette sat waiting to be smoked. This made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. I smoked and smoked and smoked, and again, the cigarette never burned down any. Eventually, we arrived at our destination, the asylum. We got out, and I looked up in awe at this towering structure. It seemed to go forever up into the heavens above. I felt a strange sense of omnipotence, like I was capable of doing anything, walking through walls, flying, etc. I walked tall into the hospital, babbling about the higher power and how I was returning home where I belonged. We walked in and sat in the waiting room for what seemed like days. Finally, this nice angel lady came out and whisked me away to what I believed to be my rightful place on the throne of the heavens. Well, I was wrong, because before I knew it, I was being sedated with Haldol. When I awoke again, I had some of my senses back and I realized where I was. Everything just felt like a dream. It seemed like none of the events of the last 2 days had even happened. I guess I was in shock at the fact of being in a hospital and why I would even be in such a place. Well, I ended up spending the next 2 weeks in the inpatient psychiatric program being evaluated and medicated. Eventually, I completely came back down and seemingly stabilized. Since my insurance wouldn't cover any additional time for diagnosis, I was released with an incomplete diagnosis. I eventually put 2 and 2 together and realized that the evil demonic plant that I had ravished had been the culprit in this horrible turn of events. Since then, I have experimented with Datura several more times. Once more, I ended up in the hospital of a much larger dose, and after that, I learned a more correct dosage of Datura and how to deal with the alarmingly realistic hallucinations and delirium. I am 15 years old. If you were to ask anyone to describe my relationship with drugs, they would tell you I am one who is down for anything. Any drug you place in front of me, I will take it with no regards for what could happen to me, which isn't something to be proud of at all. It was a typical Saturday afternoon with my friends. Me and my friend had some Coruscantins. We all drove down to the park where everyone goes to smoke, drink, do pills, or whatever. It's just the hangout spot for kids trying to get messed up. That day, we saw some kids that were friends with my friends, and they told us about this plant. They called it Hell's Bells. I have heard of it before, but I wasn't too sure on what it was or the effects of it. They told us they had taken it earlier that day, and the one kid was still very out of it. He was running around the field chasing a dog who obviously wasn't even really there. They told us at first you feel doped out on pills, then you feel drunk and are unable to walk, then you start hallucinating. I was very eager to experience the drug that sounded so wonderful to me. We asked them where we could get it. So me and 2 of my guy friends walked up the road and picked a few of the pods. Round green prickly pods right out of someone's front yard. At first, we thought the boy had told us to take only 2 seeds, so all 5 of us took 2 seeds each and waited about a half hour. Well, a half hour later, we all realized nothing had happened. We were all just as we were prior to taking the yellow seeds, so one of the boys called up the other kid and said, "Look, we each ate 2 seeds and nothing has happened." The kid told us we were supposed to eat 1 or 2 pods, so we went back and got more. The boys were skeptical about it, so me and my friend, a girl, ate a pod each. There had to be at least over 100 seeds inside. I was scared after doing this, so I decided to get dropped off at home before the plant has kicked in, just in case the trip I was about to experience wasn't what I wanted. I was so happy I decided to get dropped off when I did. About a half hour to an hour later, I started feeling a little out of place, still sober, but not quite with it. I had walked around my house, stumbling into walls, laughing, thinking this is fun. Then I found my way into the bathroom, and that is where the worst experience of my life began. I didn't feel right at all, so I decided to try and sleep. I would lay down for like 3 seconds and get up real fast, then lay down again and get up, tossing and turning, not knowing what to do. I went back to the bathroom and crawled around on all 4s in a circle, for this was the only thing calming me down. I looked at my arms. They were beet red. I finally got up and walked down the hall. Next thing I know, I fell out front of my grandmother's bedroom door and her door swung open. My aunt and grandmother came rushing out of their rooms asking me what I was on, but I had no idea and couldn't even think straight. My aunt told me to lay down, but all I could do was crawl in that one big circle as I was doing before. I don't remember what happened next, but my grandmother told me my aunt came in my room looking for me, but I had made my way into the bathroom. My pants were down to my ankles and there was blood everywhere. They drove me to the hospital for they didn't know if I had already overdosed or if I went to sleep would I wake up. They said as I was on the lawn while they were trying to get me into the car, I would just stand there and look at the lights on the car and kept saying, "Aw, look at the pretty lights." They had taken me to the hospital, which I have no recollection of, and they said that I kept walking behind the nurse's station, insisting that I had dropped something, that I wouldn't get into the wheelchair, that I kept trying to grab things that weren't there, that I was grabbing onto the doctor's leg. I swore I was asleep the whole time, but they told me I was awake. They said I was cursing at everyone, telling the nurses that I would fuck them up. The doctor came into my room yelling at me, saying I'm not the only patient they have, and I would yell at him saying, "Did I ask for you people to come to my rescue?" I remember I couldn't comprehend I was in a hospital. I kept asking my mom, why did Grandma rearrange her bedroom? But my mom kept trying to explain that I was in fact in the emergency room. I thought there were bugs all over my bed, that the railing of the bed were snakes. I thought all my friends were in the room, but it was only me and my mom. I thought the wall behind me was all cuckoo clocks, or clocks you would see in like a Dr. Seuss movie or something. I kept trying to rip out my IVs or jump out of bed, that they had to keep calling security. I remember freaking out on security, asking him, "Why are you in my bedroom? Get out!" And I remember him saying, "Em, if you get back in bed, I'll leave, okay?" And I said, "Sure, whatever." I got back in bed, but sure enough, he didn't leave. Then I remember there was one nurse I absolutely hated. Every time she came near me, I'd start screaming. I kept thinking I was smoking a cigarette, and every time I opened my eyes, it would just vanish. Then they came in with a cup of charcoal and tried making me drink it, and there was one nurse there who I liked, but only one. Every other nurse or doctor who came near me, I'd start freaking out. The nurse I liked promised me if I drank the charcoal, she would go smoke a cigarette with me, but I didn't drink it, and they had to stick the tube down my nose, twice. 6 doctors and nurses are holding me down as I'm screaming and pushing in my bed. The pain was unbearable. I had finally calmed down after they did that, then I kept having to pee because everything you drink just goes right through you. My mom told me I got so bad that I wouldn't even wipe myself. I would just throw the toilet paper, and I kept trying to flush the toilet, but it was one of those toilets that can't flush, that just sit at the side of the bed. My heart rate was 150, and from there I got sent to the Children's Hospital in West Philly. The hallucinations lasted for 2 days, and I couldn't even read the menu to order the food they wanted me to. I swore the hospital was playing music that you would hear on the radio, like Young Jock or Dr. Dre and stuff like that. Through the middle of the night, my heart rate went down to 40. I would get really dizzy and dehydrated. I was in the hospital for 3 days. And I'm always the type of person who does a drug and says, "Oh, I'll never do that again," then go back and do it the next day. But Datura is a drug I assure you I will never come in contact with again. And I hope no one ever gets the urge to try it, because I'm one of the lucky ones who has no permanent damage from this. Thank God. I'm pretty experienced when it comes to mind-altering substances, and I see a positive side to even the most seemingly pointless ones, except Datura. I have done it twice. Both times were unpleasant and dangerous, with very noticeable health problems coming from it. The first time, I ate all the seeds from one pod, about 250. I don't remember it kicking in. I remember eating them, then wondering if it was even going to work while smoking a cigarette on the couch. I remember brief segments of the experience, like smoking some bud and getting extremely bad cotton mouth, forcing my throat to close up, making it hard to breathe. I remember smoking a cigarette, looking closer at it, and having it disappear. Finally, I remember passing out next to my friend having a hard time breathing still. The second time I did it, I ate 300 plus seeds at a rave, and ended up in the parking lot pulling windshield wipers off of cars to collect them or something, so my friends tell me. I was a danger to myself, and my friends all had to restrain me and keep me in their car. My friend told me I turned blue in my face and acted like I couldn't breathe. I actually remember that, and it scares me a lot to think I almost died. The same restriction of breathing happened the first time, but to a lesser extent. That's all I remember from the 2 times I tried the substance. Neither experience was fun, and both were very dangerous. I couldn't see well for about a week afterwards, and reading was impossible. I first heard of Jimson weed in the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Later on, I found out that the goats that my parents owned when I was a young child were believed to have been poisoned by Jimson weed due to the fact that before they died, they were filmed by the local university walking around in circles, blind. The first time I came in contact with it was after viewing pictures of the plant on Erowid, and soon after discovering many plants growing on a friend of mine's property. Day 1, I eat a total of 2 seed pods. My mouth is dry, but I don't know it until I try to eat something. I feel tired, so I lie down, but I can't sleep. I get back up because my friend Josh is sleepy, so I let him have the bed. I walk outside to smoke a joint. I suddenly find myself nodding in agreement to whatever Josh was saying to me. He was sitting next to me. I turn my head away from him to take another drag of the joint and turn to pass it to him, but Josh is not there. He was never there. He has been in my bed sleeping. This takes a second to register. It seemed like at the time it was no big deal that I just completely hallucinated a human being sitting next to me. Day 2, I boil 2 leaves and 2 flowers in 1 cup of water. Does not taste bad at first, but toward the end of the cup it is hard to take in. About 20 minutes, I'm feeling kind of drunk. I sit down on the couch to watch TV to wait for it to kick in the rest of the way. It never does, or so I thought. I suddenly realized that I've been watching TV for over an hour, but I never watched TV really, so why was I watching it for so long? I walk outside to smoke a cigarette. When I return, my little brother is sitting on the couch, so I decide to have a chat with him. Mistake. I soon find myself talking about random bullshit that quickly switches to a completely different thing every sentence because I forgot whatever I was going to say before. This happened over and over again and began to frustrate me. I could not finish 2 sentences without totally forgetting anything I was just telling him about. No trace whatsoever. Just gone, lost in the abyss of time and space. He notices this and starts getting annoyed, tells me I'm on LSD in a very threatened narc tone of voice. I feel like I should clear things up, make him not believe such a thing so I can retreat to my room for a little Floyd and some doors, paranoia free. Mistake. I'm suddenly talking about invading gypsies with slingshots. One of them shot me in the hand, the bitch, making a golf ball size hole that I can see through my palm. Boy, did it hurt. I wanted to kill her, I did. My brother wants to see the scars, grabs my hand. No scars, but I don't know why. It went right through my hand, I'm telling you, honest. I'm puzzled. Where did the scars go? I then speak of climbing the radio tower. I really did this, but it was weeks before. You can fall. If you fall, you die. The tower wobbles. It sure does. The rest I cannot remember. My brother wants to know what the fuck I'm talking about. Day 3. I decide to introduce my friends to Datura. I boil a brew of about 7 leaves and 5 flowers. I'm the only one that drinks it for the most part. They didn't like the taste, so they only drank half a cup. I drank 3. Same stuff. Dry mouth, drunk feeling. I get tired, so I lie down. Then, I'm suddenly awake. My body is like iron. It is an effort to even move. I feel incredibly disoriented. I walk outside to get some air, passing my friend who says something to me. I reply, but it's such an effort to move my jaw to talk that my words come out jarbled and deep-voiced. When I'm outside, my perception of distance is so fucked up I fall down in front of the porch stairs, catching myself on the top stair every time I try to climb them. I proceed to walk in and outside over and over. I can't make up my mind. When I finally get back inside, it's time to sleep. I walk into his little brother's room, but there's no bed in the corner. Where's the bed? I search around, no bed. I search the rest of his house thinking maybe they moved the bed. I'm frustrated now. Where the fuck did the bed go? No such luck, so I sleep in his closet. I awake the next day to realize there was never any bed in the corner. There is at my house, but not his. Things in common in each experience were that I could never piss. I don't know if I never had to, but thought I did, or that I did, but could not. Also, I got tired, but I never slept. It was almost like dying. I seemed to lie down to let my current world and body die, only to get up after in a new dark world. A world of a constant state of discomfort and dark perception. Each time I hallucinated, but the hallucinations were true, not just walls breathing or colors changing hue, but actually seeing and speaking with things that were not even there. Also, there was no noise, just silence. Datura is a very strange drug. What I am about to describe is an account of something really stupid I did, and I don't recommend that anyone do it, but perhaps you can learn a thing or two from reading this. I had done a lot of mushrooms and some Datura in the past, and I wanted to see what would happen if I combined the two. Datura alone is a serious drug. It can kill you if you take too much. And the strange thing about it is that you don't know you're under its influence when it kicks in, no matter how much you try to prepare yourself. When I have done it, it has put me in a state I would compare to being asleep and dreaming vividly, but definitely not lucidly. And the difficulty in remembering the dreams and maintaining logical sequences of thoughts is roughly as it is when dreaming, only I'm walking around and trying to do things. Mushrooms I found to generally be a highly emotional experience. When I take them, I go through extreme changes in emotion very quickly, and I'm often empowered by feelings of compassion. The hallucinations seem to be secondary to that, or perhaps even a ramification of it. So what would happen if I put them both together? I wanted to try it, but didn't have anyone around to watch me, or at least, not anyone I felt comfortable telling I was experimenting with drugs. I was living with my parents at the time. This was in 2001. So I got the idea that perhaps if I also took some Zyprexa, an antipsychotic that makes me lethargic and slow, I'd be less likely to get in trouble. So I threw unmeasured amounts of Datura, psilocybin mushrooms, and Zyprexa in a blender and blended them into a homogeneous powder. I'd say the mixture was about half Datura, a quarter mushrooms, and a quarter Zyprexa. First, I tried putting a teaspoon of the stuff in some tea. The effects were mild, yet suggestive of a great insanity, if that makes any sense. My body was tingling a lot and I was laughing a lot, but at the same time, it was somewhat frightening. I put the stuff in a bag and forgot about it for a while. Then, one day in 2003, I was visiting my parents and everyone had gone to bed. I was bored out of my mind and decided I was going to get fucked up. I ate about 4 tablespoons of the mixture and lied on my bed waiting for something to happen. I fell asleep and woke up feeling horribly dehydrated. I went in the bathroom. I was trying to drink water out of the faucet, desperately, but could barely get it down my throat because it kept closing. When my throat closed, I couldn't even breathe. There must have been 40-second intervals where I couldn't open my throat even to get a breath in, and I thought I might suffocate. I kept trying to get myself to calm down and control my body, which is something I'm usually good at, but I could not get my throat to open properly. It was simply too dry. Trying to drink water made this even worse, but I thought that I might die if I didn't get some water in my system. So I kept choking and burping on the water for a long time until I managed to moisten my throat enough that I could drink. I downed as much water as I could. I remember the image of myself in the mirror being extremely bright and dangerous looking, and I was exhausted. I lied down on the bathroom floor and must have fallen asleep. At some point, I must have gone back to my bed. I remember waking up multiple times, needing to drink more water and having the throat closing problem again. Plus, I could barely walk. And I felt like I was in the middle of an intense dream, but the main priority was to make sure I could breathe and make sure I had enough water in my body. I kept trying to go into the bathroom and I would try to take a step forward and I'd fall to the side, then try to compensate and fall to the other side. I was knocking over furniture and falling all over the place and making a lot of noise. The rest is a delirious blur, and my mom, who is pretty much against any kind of drug use, had to see me like that. Obviously, I woke up my whole family knocking into bookshelves and bureaus and things. I remember slurring to them that I was just drunk and that I had drank way too much. The next day, my dad told me he had never seen anyone so drunk in his life, and my mom told me I was sitting next to her on her bed for a while, silently. She kept asking me questions and I answered her logically and literally. Then I asked her where my bed was and she told me, and I tried to get to it by going through the wall in the back of a closet. When I woke up the next day, sometime in the afternoon, I felt back to normal again, except that I still had to drink a lot of water, and my vision was blurry for at least another 24 hours. This didn't scare me much because I had read that Datura does that, and that it would wear off eventually.